What if the reason your life feels so difficult is because you are fighting the wrong battle? Think about how much energy people spend trying to change the outside world, trying to make someone understand them, trying to make someone love them, trying to force an opportunity to happen, trying to make money appear, trying to control what other people think, trying to force circumstances into a particular shape. And when reality refuses to cooperate, they become frustrated. They fight harder. They think harder. They worry harder. They check for signs. They search for answers. They try another technique. And somehow, the more they struggle, the more stuck they feel. But Neville Goddard presented an entirely different approach. Instead of constantly fighting the world outside of you, he directed attention toward the world within you. And this changes everything. Because what if the circumstance you are fighting today is not actually the source of your problem? What if it is simply showing you an old assumption? What if the person you are angry with is not the true enemy? What if the money problem is not the real enemy? What if the rejection is not the real enemy? What if the delay is not the real enemy? And what if your greatest power has been available to you the entire time? Your imagination, the trap of fighting circumstances. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that something has gone wrong. Immediately, your mind begins reacting. Why did this happen? Who caused this? How am I going to fix this? What if it gets worse? Within seconds, the external event becomes an internal experience. The event happened once, but now you are replaying it repeatedly inside your mind. And this is where the real battle begins. You may be sitting quietly in your room, but mentally you are arguing with someone. You are replaying conversations. You are imagining future problems. You are creating imaginary confrontations. You are proving why you were right. And although nothing physical is happening, your body and mind experience the emotional reality of the argument. This is why your inner world matters. Because the battle outside often continues only because you continue fighting it within. The world is not your enemy. Neville's philosophy places enormous importance on consciousness. Rather than seeing yourself as a powerless individual reacting to an independent world, you begin to examine your own assumptions. Ask yourself, what have I been assuming about this situation? Not, why is this happening? What am I assuming this means? That question is powerful because two people can experience the same circumstance and walk away with completely different futures. One person says, "This always happens to me." Another says, "This is temporary." One says, "Nobody chooses me." Another says, "The right people recognize my value." One says, "I never have enough." Another says, "I always find a way." The circumstance may be identical, but the internal identity is different, and that identity changes what happens next. Stop giving circumstances the final word. This does not mean pretending problems don't exist. It means refusing to make them permanent in your mind. There is a massive difference between acknowledging something and identifying with it. You can acknowledge, this is what is happening right now, without declaring, this is who I am. You can experience rejection without becoming the rejected person. You can experience financial difficulty without becoming a person who never has money. You can experience a disappointing relationship, without deciding, I am impossible to love. The event is one thing, the identity you attach to the event is another. And that identity is where your creative power begins, the question that changes everything. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, if I could not use my current circumstances as evidence, who would I decide that I am? Pause. Really think about it. If your bank account could not answer the question, who would you be? If your relationship status could not answer it, who would you be? If your past could not answer it, who would you be? If today's problems could not answer it, who would you be? Maybe you would decide, I am supported, I am loved, I am successful, I am secure, I am chosen, I am capable. That is the beginning of the shift. Your imagination is the place where the new life begins. Neville emphasized imagination because imagination allows you to experience a reality before physical circumstances confirm it. Suppose you desire a new career. You could spend hours worrying about how impossible it seems. Or you could close your eyes and imagine receiving the message you've been waiting for. See the screen, read the words, feel the relief. Imagine calling someone you love. Hear yourself saying, it finally happened. Notice something important. You are not fighting the old circumstance. You are building a new inner experience. And this is the difference. Don't fight the old story. Replace it. This is where many people make a mistake. They see the old reality and say, I don't want this. Then they spend hours thinking about how much they hate it. But their attention remains on it. They are still emotionally connected to it. Instead, ask, what would I rather experience? Then go there in imagination. If you don't want rejection, experience acceptance. If you don't want financial fear, experience security. If you don't want loneliness, experience connection. If you don't want uncertainty, experience certainty. Your imagination becomes the workshop where the new assumption is formed, the most powerful shift. The deepest change happens when you stop saying, I need reality to change so I can feel different, and begin saying, I will change the state I live from, regardless of what I currently see. So that is freedom, because now your emotional state is no longer completely controlled by external events. You have reclaimed something, your attention, your imagination, your inner conversation, your identity. Part 1. Ending. Narrator. But there is something even more surprising, because once you stop fighting circumstances, you still have one major enemy left. And it isn't another person. It isn't your past. It isn't your financial situation. It isn't bad luck. It is the voice inside your own mind keeps telling you. Look at the evidence. Nothing has changed. No- You need proof. Be realistic. And if you keep listening to that voice, you can destroy a new assumption before it has a chance to become natural. In part 2, we go deeper into the most dangerous habit Neville's teaching challenges, constantly checking the outside world for confirmation. Because the moment you stop demanding proof, your relationship with reality begins to change. There is a question that quietly destroys more dreams than failure ever could. It sounds innocent. It sounds logical, but it keeps millions of people trapped. The question is, where is it? Where is the money? Where is the relationship? Where is the opportunity? Where is the result? Where is the sign? Where is the evidence? And every time you ask that question from desperation, you reinforce one assumption. It isn't here. Uh, this is the hidden contradiction. You say you believe, but your emotional behavior says you are waiting. You say it is done, but you keep checking whether it has happened. You say you trust, but you panic whenever circumstances look different. You imagine yourself having, then 5 minutes later you return to, why don't I have it yet? Uh, and that is where the old identity comes rushing back. The difference between faith and checking. Imagine planting a seed. You place it in the ground, then every hour you dig it up to see whether it is growing. You would never do that with a real seed. Yet people do exactly this mentally. They imagine their desire, then they check, they imagine again, then they check, they affirm, then they check, they visualize, then they check. Eventually, the checking becomes stronger than the assumption. The imagination says, it is possible. Uh, The checking says, but where is it? And the mind becomes divided. Stop making the present moment your God. Your present circumstances are simply your present circumstances. They do not have to become your prophecy. If your current life looks completely different from what you desire, that does not mean your future must look the same. The present is not the only possible version of reality. Your current circumstances are information, they are not necessarily instructions, and this is an incredibly important distinction. Your attention is your power. Where does your attention go most often? To the problem, to the solution, to the fear, to the possibility, to what happened, or to what you want to experience? Your attention is constantly voting for a reality. Every time you repeatedly imagine failure, you strengthen the identity associated with failure. Every time you repeatedly imagine success, you strengthen the identity associated with success. This is why mental diet matters, not because you must control every thought, but because you should become aware of which thoughts you repeatedly entertain. You don't need perfect thoughts. This is important. You will have negative thoughts. You will have moments of doubt. You will have difficult days. You are human. The goal is not to become a robot who never experiences fear. The goal is to stop making fear your home. A thought can appear without becoming your identity. You can think, what if this fails? What? And then respond, maybe, but I choose to live from a different assumption. That is enough. You don't need to fight the thought, you simply stop feeding it. The power of revision. One of Neville's most interesting practices was revision. Revision means mentally revisiting an event and imagining it differently. Suppose someone rejected you. Instead of replaying the rejection for weeks, you could imagine receiving acceptance. Hear different words, see a different expression, feel a different ending. Why? Because the purpose is not to obsess over the past. It is to change your relationship with the memory. The past may have happened physically, but your emotional relationship with it can change. Imagination is not escape. Some people hear these teachings and think, so I should just ignore reality. No, this is not about becoming irresponsible. If something requires practical action, take practical action. If you need to send an application, send it. If you need to make a phone call, make it. If you need to learn a skill, learn it. The difference is the state from which you act. You can act from panic or from confidence. You can act because you are terrified of failure or because you expect yourself to succeed. The action may look similar. The consciousness behind it is different. And now we reach the deeper secret. Because once you stop fighting circumstances and stop demanding constant proof, you begin discovering something extraordinary. The person you have been trying to change may not need to change at all. The circumstances may not need to be attacked. The world may not need to be forced. Instead, you may need to change the identity from which you are experiencing the world. And in part 3, we are going to uncover the question that changes everything. Who would you be if your desire were already fulfilled? Because the goal isn't merely to imagine having something. The goal is to become familiar with the person who already has it. Imagine waking up tomorrow and somehow knowing that everything is going to work out, not because you have proof, not because every problem disappeared overnight, but because something inside you changed. You no longer see yourself as someone fighting to get somewhere. You see yourself as someone already moving toward the life you chose. That identity changes everything. Instead of asking, how do I get what I want? Ask, who am I when I already have it? If you already had financial security, how would you think? If you already had the relationship, how would you carry yourself? If you already had success, what would you stop worrying about? If you already knew you were loved, what would you no longer tolerate? These questions expose identity. The person who has it thinks differently. Someone who feels secure does not constantly search for reassurance. Someone who feels loved does not need to interpret every text message as a threat. Someone who trusts themselves does not need everyone's approval. Someone who believes in abundance does not see every opportunity as their final chance. This doesn't mean they never experience fear. It means fear does not define them. They have a different baseline, a different state, a different identity. Naturalness is the secret. The final goal is naturalness. At first, your desired identity may feel strange. You may say, I am successful, and immediately think, but look at my life. That's normal. You are introducing a new assumption, but through repetition and emotional acceptance, the new state becomes familiar. Eventually, it doesn't feel like pretending. It feels normal. And when something feels normal, you stop forcing it. Stop trying to force the how. This is another trap. You know what you want. Then immediately you start planning exactly how it must happen. It must happen through this person. It must happen by this date. This exact opportunity must appear. And suddenly your imagination becomes a prison. You have decided not only the destination, but every possible road. What if the outcome could arrive through a path you cannot currently see? The power of assumption is not necessarily knowing the route. It is knowing the destination internally. Let your inner state lead. Suppose your desire is success. Instead of obsessing, which opportunity will create my success? Begin with, I am successful. Then allow your actions to emerge from that identity. Maybe you apply somewhere. Maybe you create something. Maybe you meet someone. Maybe an unexpected opportunity appears. The path can surprise you. Your responsibility is not to control every detail. Your responsibility is to become familiar with the state you choose. The person who stops fighting becomes powerful. When you stop fighting everyone, you gain energy. When you stop fighting every circumstance, you gain clarity. When you stop fighting your past, you gain freedom. When you stop fighting uncertainty, you gain peace. And when you stop fighting yourself, you gain enormous power because now your attention is available for creation instead of resistance. But there is one final question. What happens when you choose a new state and tomorrow something goes wrong? What happens when the old reality suddenly appears again? What happens when someone disappoints you? What happens when the evidence looks completely opposite to what you imagined? This is where most people return to the old identity, and this is exactly where your practice becomes real. Part 4 will show you how to remain internally committed without becoming obsessed, how to deal with setbacks, and how to stop allowing temporary circumstances to steal the identity you have chosen. There will come a moment when life tests your new identity, not necessarily because the universe is punishing you, but because old habits have momentum. You have spent years thinking one way. You have spent years reacting one way. You have spent years telling the same story. You cannot expect every old reaction to disappear instantly. The key is what you do when it returns. When the old story returns, maybe you suddenly feel afraid. Maybe an old memory appears. Maybe someone says something that triggers you. Maybe you look at your circumstances and think, nothing has changed. Stop, take a breath, and ask, do I want to return to the old story? Yeah. You have a choice. You can continue the old mental conversation, or you can choose a new one. This is not the final chapter. I know who I am. I don't need to fight this. I choose the state I live from. Don't turn manifestation into another form of struggle. This is crucial. You should not spend your entire day monitoring your thoughts. You should not panic because you had one negative thought. You should not repeatedly visualize because you are terrified the manifestation will disappear. That is still fear. That is still fighting. The goal is peace. The goal is confidence. The goal is naturalness. You imagine, you accept, you live, you continue your life, your new mental position. Imagine your inner world becoming, I know what I have chosen. I don't need to convince everyone. I don't need to force anyone. I don't need to control every circumstance. I don't need constant proof. I simply return to the state I have chosen. That is strength. What if someone treats you badly? You do not have to physically remain in harmful situations. You can set boundaries, you can leave, you can protect yourself, but internally, you don't have to turn another person's behavior into your identity. You don't have to conclude, nobody respects me. Instead, I respect myself. That identity changes what you tolerate. It changes how you communicate. It changes how you respond. It changes the decisions you make. What if money is tight? Deal with the practical situation. Make a plan, budget, work, learn, take action. But don't add an identity on top of the problem. There is a difference between I have a financial problem I need to solve and I am a person who will always struggle. One describes a situation, the other creates an identity. What if your dream takes time? This is where patience becomes powerful. You don't need to constantly ask, why isn't it here? Instead, what would the fulfilled version of me do today? Maybe they would work, maybe rest, maybe create, maybe learn, maybe enjoy their life, maybe stop checking. And that's the point. Your desire should not become a prison. It should become a direction. You were never meant to control every person. You were never meant to force every circumstance. You were never meant to spend your life fighting reality. Your power begins when you recognize that you can choose the consciousness from which you experience reality. You can choose what you repeatedly imagine. You can choose what story you continue. You can choose which identity you strengthen. You can choose where your attention lives. And that is the power Neville Goddard wanted you to discover. So tonight, don't fight, don't chase, don't beg, don't obsess over signs, don't demand immediate proof. Instead, close your eyes, take a breath, and imagine the version of yourself who already knows. The version who no longer needs to fight everyone. The version who no longer needs to force circumstances. The version who walks through life with quiet certainty. Ask yourself, how would I feel if I knew everything was already moving in my favor? Stay there, not for hours, not through force, just long enough to become familiar with it. Feel the relief, feel the certainty, feel the peace, then let it go. Tomorrow, live from that identity. When circumstances challenge you, return. When doubt appears, return. When the old story calls, return. Not through struggle, through choice. The world may not change the moment you close your eyes, but something much more important can change. You can change the person who is looking at the world. And when you change that person, you change the assumptions you carry. You change the conversations you have. You change the decisions you make. You change what you expect. You change what you accept. And eventually, your life begins reflecting that change. So stop fighting people. Stop fighting circumstances. Stop fighting yesterday. Stop fighting the present moment. Instead, change the state from which you live. Because perhaps the greatest power you have been searching for was never outside of you. It was your imagination. It was your assumption. It was your ability to choose who you are before the world gives you evidence. And that is where the real transformation begins. Don't fight reality. Choose the reality you are willing to live from.